Hello, it's Erin LaFaive of Full Circle Herbals doing the last day of the Drink Herbal Tea Challenge, Drink More or Herbal Tea Challenge. So we're talking today about how to grow herbs that are good for herbal tea. So I'll tell you a little bit about the drying process too and when to harvest them. So the last few days we've been talking about how to make herbal tea in different ways and how to make it a enjoyable experience to drink it and to have a time where you relax with it. And we also had a day where we spoke about forget what the other topic was. How to make a tea, how to spice it up. Anyway, it doesn't matter. Just waiting for a few more people maybe to pop on here before I start talking about which herbs to grow for herbal tea. So I did send out a handout that included some useful tips for growing herbs, and I'll be sending a second email, a follow-up email that gives tips on how to harvest herbs, and also another one with just some more tips about growing herbs in containers. So those two handouts will be sent out later. And for now, we are going to get started about herbs for which herbs to grow. So some really simple herbs to grow that I would consider good for anyone. I'll talk about calendula, chamomile, mint, lemon balm, and peppermint are good ones. Yeah, I'll talk about those ones. And if you are on, let me know and I can see you in the chat. I see Emma is here. Hello, Emma. Nice to catch you here. So let's talk about growing herbs. So if you can either grow them in the ground or grow them in containers, but you need to have something essential, and that is enough sun. So enough sun means something around the time of 11 to noon hour, and then 6 to 8 hours on from that. You need a good 6 to 8 hours of sunlight, strong direct sunlight, to get plants to grow successfully. If you had less sun, you'll probably get them to grow still, but some of the ones that go into flower may have a little bit difficulty doing that. Things like mints, we don't necessarily need them to get to flower. It certainly is good for peppermint and spearmint to get to the flower stage. Usually it's a stronger flavor when they're at that peak, but it's not completely necessary. If you were growing commercially, you'd want to get the best, the best peak possible for flavor. But if you're just growing for yourself, you don't have to get that extra 10 to 20% of quality in there. So mints would be good for a little lower light environment because we're just really interested in the leafy product of it. So the leaves and the stems is what we call the aerial parts, and that's really what you want for a lot of herbs as well. So all of the mints we're really interested in the leaves. And with chamomile and calendula, we're interested in the flower. So the flower is, it really needs a little bit longer and more direct sunlight to get to that stage. So chamomile and calendula, you're just harvesting the flowers. Mints, it's usually the leaves. And then there's so many different other kinds of plants you can grow for herbal teas too. So a lot of the mints is just the leaves and the stems. So if you did something like if you were growing sage to add to an herbal tea mix, a lot of times sage is added, like the culinary sage, the one you cook with. A lot of times that one is added to tea mixes for like needing of a warming or expectorant kind of feeling in the chest area or the nasal area. So sage is grown just for its leaf as well. It can tolerate a little bit of shade, but it still needs a good 6 hours of sunlight. And so all these ones can be grown in pots as well. So You can do it in ground if you have that direct sunlight in that particular spot. If you don't, you can think about using containers so that you can put them strategically in areas where you're living that get that full 6 to 8 hours of direct sunlight. Some people even have to move them throughout the day, but if you're working, you might not be able to do that. So, but containers are also a good idea or a helpful idea if you're renting and don't have in-ground space. You can, if you have a patio, or if you're like up on a second floor for an apartment, you know, if you have a balcony, you can grow these herbs, especially if you have that full sunlight. So chamomile is pretty easy to grow from seed. It's a very tiny, tiny seed, and it's so tiny that you'll probably plant too many, and then as they're coming up, they might look like they're really too close to each other, and you'll probably have to snip one out of there so that the other one can grow much bigger. Or you can buy them as plants already started at most local, you know, greenhouses have those, and I know that you can order plants through the mail now too, so that's an option. But chamomile is pretty darn easy to grow from seed. Some of them are a little bit tricky, but chamomile is a good one, and it will reseed itself if you don't harvest the flower. It will just go back, produce many seeds, lots of seeds, and you might get some next year in near that same spot. So once the flower is already picked, or once the flower is ready, I usually like to pick it when the petals are up like this, or they're just starting to come down, and then maybe if they're down even a little bit further. But at some point they're going to start to turn to seed because they get pollinated from insects coming around, and it turns to seed, and that's not what we want. We want the flower. So, and they come, the flowers not ripen, they bloom at different times. It's not like the whole plant will bloom all at once. So you got to be watching the plant and going out every day to see which ones are ready to be picked. And I just pick the top off and put them in a bowl that sits on my counter, and then voila, they dry in a couple days and they're ready to be used. You certainly could make a tea out of fresh chamomile flowers too, but like I said, they don't all flower at once, and if you're just doing like a little pot or a little part in your garden, you might have to wait a little bit to get a good amount to make, you know, a tablespoon or more in a cup of tea. So they dry really fast, they're easy to pick, and they're pretty easy to grow. You just need to water them pretty much, and then they'll grow. So yeah, and then you can store them in I like to store everything, if possible, in a glass container. And when you do that, you can also check back in 24 to 48 hours after you put them in there for the first time, just to see if there's any condensation in the jar, because that would indicate that they weren't dried all the way, and you would just take them out and continue to dry them. So some of the other ones that are really great in pots are any of the mints. They do very well in pots, and the roots will keep coming up, and they're trying to spread. That's what mints do. They really like to run underground with their root system and pop up new flowers or new plants. So they will eventually take over that whole pot. And if you find somebody that has some mint, especially in a pot, what you can do is take that plant out, cut the plant in half, and then put new soil in 2 other containers, and you've just divided that plant and made another one. You can also do that if it's in the ground too. You just get a sharp shovel and put it in the ground and split it like in half or thirds or whatever they have available. And sometimes you can even do it by hand, and you're just looking for those roots that almost looks like the stem goes underground a bit, and then the roots come off, and they'll make more as long as you put it in a new pot or new spot in the garden. So they're very easy to just take a cutting from somebody else. Certainly mints are very easy to find in most greenhouses because they're just so easy to grow. Lemon balm would be one. Peppermint, spearmint are very common ones that you could find. Catnip is also in the same plant family, and they all grow prolifically. So sometimes people actually have to weed them out because they're growing in, they've spread so far into other areas where you don't want them to be. So that's only the downside of mints, is that they can just grow and grow and grow, but it's also very helpful too. So the mints, pretty easy to dry. You're cutting the top of the plant, and then you can, I like to dehydrate those a bit more because the stem is going to dry more slowly than the mint leaf at times. So the only one that I do air dry, I've had a lot of success air drying, is chocolate mint, which is right here. It's got some little flowers on it. And actually it grows like really kind of in a tangled mat. And so it's hard to find like that one stem and to clip it out and to move along and to hang them upside down in your house like that. So it's kind of like I have to group them all together and do a little haircut. And then I like to put them in like a paper bag, punch holes in that paper bag and hang it up, and then the airflow can come in there and they dry pretty fast. I've also used mesh bags, like your fruits and vegetables come in, where it's just a mesh, and you stick those in and empty one of those, and lots of airflow in them, so that's really helpful. So mints are very good. The lemon balm can be a little bit trickier. It has a tendency to get pretty brown in the dehydrator, and if you can do some air drying with it as well. This one's only been out a couple days, so there you go. It's already getting pretty crispy. It's has a lot of fragrance. So yeah, so chamomile. Now calendula is used, I like to use calendula in herbal tea mixes because it's just very pretty and it gives a nice color, especially if you're doing a lot of stuff with just green leaves, like different spearmints, lemon mints. You know, some of them are just very, very green, and there's no liveliness or color to them except the beautiful green color. So calendula can be added to give it that color, and there are some other properties of calendula that can be good for the mix too. But calendula is another one that you need to watch, because as it blooms, you need to catch it as it's just opening up. If it gets pollinated, it goes to seed really fast, and that seed, the seeds are really neat looking. So it's good to leave some of the blossoms going so that they can go to seed, because then you can collect that seed and grow more calendula from it next year. So yeah, you get just the calendula flower off, and then I put mine in a bowl just like the chamomile and let it air dry, and it does wonderfully that way. It keeps the color keeps really well, and it's very fresh. And after it's all done and dried, then I put them into a jar and have this beautiful looking jar of calendula. I make salves from them, but I also put them in tea mixes from time to time. Usually I like to make salve from them. So we've got chamomile, calendula, and the mints. What else can I tell you? The nettle, I've spoken about nettle many times, about the tea and how medicinal it is. So as long as you dry nettle or cook it, that sting is released from the hairs of the plant, diluted in water, and there's no sting. In fact, it can help with allergy symptoms and give a lot of protein and iron and fiber and all that kind of stuff. So the great way to harvest nettle is when it's pretty, it's, you know, a good half a foot to a foot, or even a little bit more, but just before it goes to seed, definitely. And you can wear gloves. As long as you wear gloves, then you're not going to feel that sting. And I like to clip it out and then hang it upside down to dry in my house, and it dries really well that way. It doesn't have any problems with drying too slowly, because sometimes when herbs or plants dry too slowly, then they can start to mildew and things like that. You don't have any problem with that. I've never had any problem with that with nettle. So you just have to have nice, good airflow in the house. It definitely can't be humid. So it has to be, you know, on not a cold environment, because you need the air to wick away the the moisture from the plant, and you need a little bit of warmth to be able to, for the air to be able to do that. So a dark place away from sun, just out of the, out of direct sunlight. It's just some airflow. A fan can be helpful for that too. So those are good things to do for drying herbs. Definitely do not put them in your kitchen above a sink or stove, because they'll get steam, and then they could actually get rehydrated and never really dry out fully. So that would be a problem. Then they would just not taste as well, and maybe even mold or mildew, and it would be not a good cup of tea. So then when you're done with nettle, what I do is I just take the leaf. Let's see. I take the, this is not nettle, but I'm just describing what I do. I take the stem and I hold it, and then I just pull down, and all the leaves come off into the container. But you certainly could just crumble this up too and stick it in a bag or a large jar too. So those are some tips for how to handle nettle. I will say that sometimes when nettle is dry and I'm handling it with my hands, I can get a little bit itchy just from my hands, a little bit of irritation, but nothing too big. Yeah, so those are some of my herb recommendations for herbal tea, for people who want to maybe grow them in containers or start a little spot in their garden. There's certainly many other ones that can be done. Lavender, like I have a bag of lavender here. This one is for some craft projects, because I've had people digging their hands in there, and so we just make like sachets and dream pillows and relaxing sachets in here from this lavender. But lavender is very common in teas, and I can't really grow this much lavender here. The climate isn't really that good and conducive for it. My spikes and my flowers aren't that big. So this is definitely one that people could grow in a different climate, lavender, and that one dries really well too. Cutting those blossoms off and hanging them in bundles, they dry so well that way. But I just get my few little snippets of lavender, and I just keep them for looking at and just enjoying their smell and their beauty just around me. I haven't been able to make like a tea from my own lavender. All right, I would really be interested in learning what everybody else has tried growing in pots and in the garden for teas, and let me know. A picture would be great too. So this is the last day of the Drink More Herbal Tea Challenge, and I hope you've got some really great ideas and maybe got into a little bit of a flow. I'll be sending another email out with all the replays and all the handouts that I've had, and even a couple bonuses today for some handouts. If you're interested in learning more from me, I'll notify people through email and through the Facebook group here about what we're doing. And I certainly have the Learning Herbalism workbook that can be found online through Amazon and all sorts of other online outlets. So if you're interested in learning more about herbalism, that workbook has many helpful worksheets in there to guide you along the way. So I also do herbal consultations for people, giving them ideas about which herbs could match up with their wellness goals and their health concerns. So just like an educational consult service that way. So you can check out my website at fullcircleherbals.com to get more details on those herb consultations. So thank you for joining me, and I hope you enjoyed this challenge. Thank you.